Adhyatmic, what is Adi Daivik, what is Adi Bhautik. That description is going on. Okay. Till we saw Nirodho, Mukti, all these things has been described very nicely from the third verse onwards, right? Third verse to seventh verse describes the and subject matters. Now let us see. The individual person possessing different instruments of senses is called the Adhyatmic person. Adhyatmic. And then the individual controlling deity of the senses is Adi Daivik. Embodiment seen on the eyeballs is Adi Bhautik. What you see around you is Adi Bhautik. Who is controlling deity of the senses is Adi Daivik. Adhyatmic are the different senses. That is why we say tapa also. Adhyatmic tapa refers to the miseries pertaining to the body. So what is Adhyatmika? That is the different senses, the body and the different senses. The different senses also comes the mind also. And then what is Adi Bhautik? What you see around is Adi Bhautik. What is Adi Daivik? The controlling deity. So Adi Daivik, the controlling deity can give the punishments if we do not obey the law of nature. So yaha adhyatmikaha ayam purusha. So the individual person possessing different instruments of senses is the adhyatmic person. Sahahi. And then Adi Daivikaha, controlling deity. And then Vichhedaha, Purushaha, Adi Bhautika. Whatever is visible, that is Adi Bhautika. Okay, read. Aruna, read.
Hare Krishna. Text 8, chapter 10. Yodhyatmikoyam purushah sosaveva daivikaha yastro bhaya vichchedah purusho hyadi bhautikaha. The individual person possessing different instruments of senses is called Adhyatmic person, and the individual controlling deity of the senses is called Adi Daivik. The embodiment seen on the eyeballs is called the Adi Bhautik person. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The supreme controlling Samam Bonam is a personality of Godhead in his plenary portion of Paramatma or the super soul manifestation. In the Bhagavad Gita 10.42, it is said, Athava bahunaitena kim gyatena tava arjuna vishtavyaham idam kritsnam ekamshena sthito jagat. All the controlling deities like Vishnu, Brahma and Shiva are different manifestations of the Paramatma feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, who exhibits himself in such manners by entering into each and every universe generated for him. But still, apparently, there are divisions of the controller and controlled. For example, in the food controlling department of the controller of food is a person made of the same ingredients as the person who is controlled. Similarly, each and every individual in the material world is controlled by the higher demigods. For example, we have our senses, but the senses are controlled by superior controlling deities. We cannot see without light, and the supreme controller of light is the sun. The sun god is in the sun planet, and we, the individual human beings or any other beings on this earth, are all controlled by the sun god as far as our eyes are concerned. Similarly, all the senses we have are controlled by the superior demigods, who are also as much living entities as we are, but one is empowered while the other is controlled. The controlled living entity is called the Adhyatmic person, and the controller is called the Adidhaivik person. All these positions in the material world are due to different fruitive activities. Any individual living being can become the sun god or even Brahma or any other god in the upper planetary system by a higher grade of pious work. And similarly, one becomes controlled by the higher demigods by lower grades of fruitive activities. So, every individual living entity is subject to the supreme control of the Paramatma, who puts everyone in different positions of the controller and the control. That which distinguishes the controller and the controlled, that is a material body, is called the Adi Bhautik Purusha. The body is sometimes called Purusha, as confirmed in the Vedas in the following hymn: Sava Esha Purusho Na Rasamayaha. The body is called Annarasa embodiment. This body depends on food. The living entity which is embodied does not eat anything. However, because the owner is spirit in essence, the material body requires replacement of matter for the wearing and tearing of the mechanical body. Therefore, the distinction between the individual living entity and controlling planetary deities is in the Anna Rasamaya body. The sun may have a gigantic body and the man may have a smaller body, but all these visible bodies are made of matter. Nonetheless, the God and the individual person who are related as the controller and the controlled are the same spiritual parts and parcels of the Supreme Being, and it is the Supreme Being who places different parts and parcels in different positions. And thus, the conclusion is that the Supreme Person is the shelter of all. Hare Krishna.
Okay. So previous verse you spoke about the Ashraya Tattva. Right? The Ashraya Bhagavan, from whom everything creation, sub-creation, protection, mercy, karma, dharma, everything has been spoken in the previous verse. Now, the same Ashraya Tattva is present as Paramatma in our body. Now, what is the difference between Paramatma and Jiva? That has been spoken in this 8th verse and 9th verse. 8th verse, 9th verse speaks about the difference between the Lord who is situated as Antaryami within all the bodies and the Jiva Tattva. Lord says, Vishtabhyaham idam krishnam ekamshena sthito jagat. In Bhagavad Gita 10th chapter, 42nd verse, Krishna says, Vishtabhyaham idam krishnam ekamshena sthito jagat. By my one portion, I am present everywhere. So 10.42 speaks about how Lord is present in this material world. By one portion, and is present as the Antaryami within all the bodies. Now, Jiva has coverings that has been given. Sava Eshaha Purusha Anna Rasamaya. Why Purusha is used? Jiva is also known as Purusha. Jiva. To one extent, Purusha. This Purusha refers, the word Purusha is used in all these cases to indicate these are the coverings on the Jiva. Purusha. All these coverings are there. What are the coverings? Gross organ. This is one covering. Sense objects. That is also tanmatras. They are all coming in the gross body. You see what is the 24 elements? What you have? 5 knowledge-giving senses, 5 working senses, 5 gross elements, 5 sense organs. So sense organs, senses, they all come as gross body. Then we have sense deities also. So to see the things around, it is the sun deity who is controlling our eye. That is how there are many other deities or many other devatas who are controlling our senses. They are known as Adi Daivikaha. And what is Adhyatmika Purushaha? The covering as a settled sense organ. So Adi Daivika constitutes 20 elements. Also mind also. 21 you can say. Mind. Intelligence, false ego, that also can come. Whatever. That is all gross body. Generally, it is the gross body, also the subtle body. Both the covering known as subtle sense organ. You have 20 gross and 4 subtle. Everything comes in Adi Adhyatmika. Adi Daivika, the controlling deity of the senses. Okay. Adi Bhautika, what you see around. So that is why this Purusha word is used. So that these are the coverings. These are the coverings for the jiva. It is not the jiva which is hungry. This is the body, Anna Rasamaya. Anna Rasamaya. Sava Esha Purusha Anna Rasamaya. The Purusha is composed of food and taste. So it is not the jiva is known as Purusha. Again, it's not jiva is known as Purusha. Here Purusha is composed of food and taste. That means the word Purusha is used in all these cases to indicate these are the coverings on the jiva. So Purusha is indicating the coverings on the jiva. You are understanding? Anyhow, Param Purusha is Krishna only. Sometimes jiva is also known as Purusha. Sometimes the coverings are also known as Purusha. Purusha is used in all these cases to indicate that these are the coverings on the jiva. So in one sense, you can say jiva is Purusha, all these things are the coverings. And what are those coverings? And if you say the coverings are the Purusha, Purusha is composed of food and taste. It doesn't matter how the Purusha word is used. What is mattering is what are the coverings, what is the difference between jiva and Antaryami, Paramatma. The jiva it has all this person. This Purusha has 3 things. Adhyatmika, Adi Daivika, Adi Bhautika. So here what you see, the individual person possessing different instruments. Here individual person Purusha refers to what? Jiva. So jiva has Adhyatmika, these all coverings. Okay, the 3 coverings are there for the Purusha. Now, 9th verse also speaks about the difference. Now, Lord doesn't have all these coverings. Jiva has all these coverings. This is the difference. So, Antaryami doesn't have all these coverings. But Jiva has all these 3 coverings. Ekam, now let us see 9th verse. Ekam ekatara bhave yada nopala bhamahi. Tritayam tatra yo vedaha sa atma swashrayashrayah. Ekam, one, ekatara, another. Abhave, in the absence of, yada, because, no, does not, upalabhav, mahe, perceptible, tritayam, in 3 states. Tatra there. Bade Prabhu, mute your phone. Mute your phone. Okay. Upalabha mahi, perceptible, tritayam in 3 stages. Tatra there. Yaha the one, Veda who knows. Saha he, Atma the super soul. Swa own, Ashraya shelter, Ashraya of the shelter. All 3 of the above mentioned stages of 3 of different living entities are interdependent. Like Adhyatmika is dependent on Adi Daivika. Adi Daivika, because of Adi Daivika, Adi Bhautika can be seen. Like the controlling deity of the eye is who? Sun. Because of the sun, the light is there. And because of the light, you can see the things around. So they are interdependent. In the absence of one, another is not understood. You cannot understand Adhyatmika, that means your gross body and the subtle body, without the controlling deity of the body. You cannot understand Adi Bhautika without understanding Adhyatmika. What you see, the things around, also constitutes Adhyatmika. Isn't it? So that cannot be understood without each other. But the Supreme Person who sees every one of them is the shelter. Ashraya, Ashrayaha. Is a shelter of the shelter, is independent of the all. is a shelter of the shelter. So, in these three bodies, Adhyatmika, Adidaivika, and Adibhautika, in these three aspects, there is a shelter. Who is that shelter? Jiva. Jiva has taken the shelter of the body. Now, who is the shelter for that Jiva? It is Krishna. He is the shelter of the shelter. That is why he is known as Super Soul, the supreme shelter. So the shelter of the shelter has taken the shelter of the shelter is Paramatma. So what is the difference between Paramatma and Jiva has been given in these two verses. There are three coverings for the Purusha. Which Purusha? Jiva. Now, Lord doesn't have these three coverings. Lord is independent. Jiva, which has taken the shelter of these three coverings, has taken the shelter of that super soul. Tayam Tvayo Veda Sa Atma Swashrayashraya. It has taken the shelter of the super soul that has been given. Okay, Raksha did. Because these two 8 and 9 speaks about the difference between Atma and Paramatma.
Hare Krishna. Shloka 9. एकमेकतरा भावे यदा नोपलभामहे त्रितयं तत्र यो वेद स आत्मा स्वाश्रयाश्रय. All three of the above mentioned stages of different living entities are interdependent. In the absence of one, another is not understood. But the Supreme Being who sees every one of them as shelter of the shelter is independent of all, and therefore he is supreme shelter. There are innumerable living entities, one dependent on the other, in the relationship of the controlled and the controller. But without the medium of perception, no one can know or understand who is the controlled and who is the controller. For example, the sun controls the power of our vision. We can see the sun because the sun has its body, and the sunlight is useful only because we have eyes. Without our having eyes, the sunlight is useless, and without sunlight, the eyes are useless. Thus, they are interdependent, and none of them is independent. Therefore, the natural question arises concerning who made them interdependent. The one who has made such a relationship of interdependence must be ultimately completely independent. As stated in the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the ultimate source of all independent objects is the complete independent subject. This ultimate source of the super soul, who is not dependent on anything else, is Sarva Ashraya Ashraya. He is only dependent on his self, and thus he is supreme shelter of everything. Although Paramatma and Brahman are subordinate to Bhagavan, because Bhagavan is the Purushottam of the super person or the super person. He is the source of super soul also. In the Bhagavad Gita 15.18, Lord Krishna says that he is the Purushottam and the source of everything. And thus it is concluded that Shri Krishna is the ultimate source and shelter of all entities, including the super soul and supreme Brahman. Even accepting that there is no difference between the super soul and the individual soul is dependent on the super soul for being liberated from the illusion of material energy. The individual is under the clutches of illusory energy, and therefore, although qualitatively one with the super soul, is under the illusion of identifying himself with matter. And to get out of this illusory conception of factual life, the individual soul has to depend on the super soul to be recognized as one with him. In that sense, also the super soul is supreme shelter, and there is no doubt about it. The individual living entity, the Jiva, is always dependent on the super soul, Paramatma, because the individual soul forgets his spiritual identity, whereas the super soul, Paramatma, does not forget this transcendental position. In the Bhagavad Gita, this separate position of the Jivatma and the Paramatma are specifically mentioned. In 4th chapter, Arjun, the Jiva's soul is represented as forgetful of his many previous births. But the Lord, the super soul, is not forgetful. The Lord even remembers when he taught the Bhagavad Gita to the sun god some billions of years before. The Lord can remember such millions and billions of years as stated in the Bhagavad Gita 7.26 as follows. वेदाहं समतीतानि वर्तमानानि चार्जुन भविष्याणि च भूतानि मातु वेदन कश्चन. The Lord in his eternal blissful body of knowledge is fully aware of all that happens in the past, that which is going on in the present, and also what will happen in the future. But in spite of his being the shelter of both the Paramatma and the Brahman, person with a poor fund of knowledge are unable to understand him as he is. The propaganda of the identity of the cosmic consciousness with the consciousness of the individual living entity is completely misleading, because even such a person or individual soul as Arjun could not remember his past deeds, although he is always with the Lord. And what can the tiny ordinary man, falsely claiming to be one with the cosmic consciousness, know about his past, present, and future? Hare Krishna. Mataji. Mataji, we cannot hear you.
So the last line, just go to the last line. Last line is Sa Atma. Sa Atma. Swa Ashraya. Ashraya. So Lord, who is Sa Atma, that is super soul, has been mentioned here. He is the shelter of himself. Paramatma is a shelter for shelter. Okay? He is a shelter of himself. Paramatma. Paramatma has taken shelter of whom? Paramatma only. Okay? Jiva has taken shelter of whom? Paramatma. Okay? And then, how Lord is present? How Lord is present? As Amsha. So Paramatma is Amsha of Krishna. So Krishna is the shelter of Paramatma. That is why Krishna is a chief shelter. Even Paramatma as his Amsha is also shelter. Brahman is also a shelter. All are forms of Lord only, na? Features of Lord, Brahman, Paramatma. So Krishna, that is Bhagavan. Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. All three are shelter. But in that, Bhagavan is a chief shelter. Because all two are features of Lord. Okay? Swa Ashraya refers to Lord is the Ashraya for himself only. To whom he has taken Ashraya? To himself. Now the three coverings of Jiva. What are the three coverings? Adhyatmika, which cannot be seen. Actually, in one sense, it is actually subtle organs. In one sense, Adhyatmika. When you see Adi Bhautika, what you are seeing? Gross. When you say, here very subtle differences. The body is made up of gross elements, which I cannot see. Earth, water, fire, air, ether also I am not able to see. Understand it very nicely. So, Adhyatmika includes 24 elements. Understand it nicely. Okay? Which I am not able to understand. But within the 24 elements, I can see the sense objects. That sense objects is the gross form, which comes in Adi Bhautika. The form, sense objects. Now, what comes in Adi Devika? Controlling deities. So the gross form which I can see comes in Adi Bhautika. The body constitutes of sense organs, gross and subtle. That comes in Adi Adhyatmika. Okay? So Jiva has three coverings. Lord doesn't have any covering. Jiva has taken shelter of Paramatma. Paramatma has taken shelter of Paramatma. And ultimately, Paramatma has taken shelter of Krishna only. So Brahman, why Brahman has been mentioned? Because Brahman, again, is the things what you see around. That also has taken shelter of Krishna. That is why in the 7th verse, Ashraya Tattva, that Ashraya Tattva has been extended here. That he is the shelter for everyone. How Ekam Shena Sthito Jagat. By one portion, he is present. So all these three coverings are interdependent. Jiva is very much interdependent. That is why when we say Devatas, they are the controlling deities. The sun god, controlling deity of our eyeball. Without light, what you are going to see the object? So in the same way, there are controlling deities for all our organs. And that is the only reason we have bangles to be put, the tika to be put in the Agni Chakra. All these things are the ornaments. They satisfy the controlling deity of that particular organ. And the bangles are put, tika is put, Karana Cheda is done. Then you have the wristband. No, what is it called? Amarka. Waistband. What do you call it? Arna. What do you call that?
कंदर, हम लोग कंदर
No,
बोलते हैं.
in Tamil, what do you call it?
Aranakair.
Aranakair. So all these things are actually for satisfying the particular deity in that particular place. Let me just see how many deities are there, how many devatas are controlling our body. And ultimately all have taken shelter of whom? Swashraya. That is Lord. Okay. Now let us see. So in this chapter, everything has been answered. How the material universe has been made now. 3 Vishnus have been spoken in the next verse.
Sorry,
Next
Mataji, Mataji. Brahman has taken shelter of Paramatma or Lord? Bhagwan.
Brahman. Brahma बोल रहे क्या? Brahman. Brahman is what? What is Brahman? Effulgence coming out of whatever you see around is Brahman. Whatever you see around is Brahman. Effulgence coming out of the body of Lord. Whatever you see around, all the universes, everything. So Brahman has taken shelter of whom? Krishna only. Na? Krishna's feature is Brahman. Don't say Brahma. Brahman. 10th verse. Purusho Andam. Vinir Vidya. Yadasau cha Vinargataha. Atmano Yanam. Anvichan Apo Srakshite Shuchi. Is it Shushi? Cha and Shu is there. Purusho Andam. So the Supreme Person, Andam, the universes. Vinir Vidya, making them each separately situated. Yada when, Asau, the same, Sahahi, the Lord, Vinirgataha came out, Atmanaha of himself, Ayanam, lying in place, Anvichan, desiring, Apaha water, Asrakshita, created, Shuchi, the most pure, Shuchi, translated, Shuchi. So after separating the different universes, the gigantic universal form of the Lord Mahavishnu, which came out of the causal ocean, the place of appearance for the first Purusha Avatara, entered into each of the separate universes, desiring to lie on the created transcendental water, that is Garbhodaka. So after separating the different universes, now Lord glanced at Mat Tattva, infused Kala Shakti and Jiva Shakti. And from his aroma, there is hair pores, so many universes came out. And Lord entered in each universes. After separating the universes, he entered each universe as Garbhodakshai Vishnu. Okay. Bade Prabhu, can you read? It's a big purport. Or Aruna, you read? It's a big purport. You can share the purport with Raksha also. Or you only read. What is a big purport it is? Because we'll be ending the class today with this purport only. 2 verses has been put. Maya Dekshana Prakriti Suyate Sacharacharam. Hetunanena Kaunteya Jagada Parivartate. Krishna is seeing everything. Maya Adhyakshana Prakriti. Avajananti Mamuda Manushim Dharmash. Parambhavajananto Mama Bhuta Maisha. So if a person doesn't understand Lord and thinks Lord is only a human, then he is actually a mudha. So these 2 verses has been spoken. Why? Because Lord is the creator. Afterwards, Brahma became the sub-creator. But initially, who is the creator? Lord is the creator. Now, the difference between Jiva and the Lord has been established through the 10 characteristics of Maha Purana. And thus, Bhakti to the Lord has been hinted as a deliverance of the Jiva from the world. Now, Sukadeva speaks in order to explain a topic he promised. Yad utaham tvaya prishto vairajata purushavidam yatasit tad upakhya. I will explain what you asked me concerning how this universe arose from the universal form. Now, in 9th chapter, 46 verse, Sukadeva Goswami promised, I will explain to you. Yad utaham, whatever you have asked, tvaya prishto, whatever you are asked, I will explain. So, here about the universal form, because always the universal form and the self has been spoken. Now, how this form has, not the universal form, how the universe has emanated. All these has been spoken in this verse. And previous to that, Jiva and the Lord, the difference between Jiva and the Lord, all those things has been spoken. Okay. Okay. Now read the purport so that we can understand it more nicely. Read.
Text 10. Purusho andam vinirbhidya yada sausa vinirgatah atmano yanaman vichan napostrakshi chuchi shuchi. Translation. After separating the different universes, the gigantic universal form of Lord Mahavishnu, which came out of the causal ocean, the place of appearance of the first Purusha Avatara, entered into each of the separate universes, desiring to lie on the created transcendental water, Garbhodaka. Purport by Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. After analysis of the living entities and the Supreme Lord, Paramatma, the independent source of all other living beings, Srila Sukadeva Goswami is now presenting the prime necessity for devotional service to the Lord, which is the only occupational business of all entities. The Supreme Lord Sri Krishna and his plenary portions and extensions of plenary portions are non-different from one another, and thus the supreme independence is in each and every one of them. In order to prove this, Shukadeva Goswami, as promised to King Parikshit, describes herein the independence of the Purusha Avatara, the personality of Godhead, even in the sphere of the material creation. Such activities of the Lord are also transcendental, and therefore they are also Leela or pastimes of the absolute Lord. Such pastimes of the Lord are very conducive to the hearers for self-realization in the field of devotional service. Some may argue, why not then relish the transcendental Leela of the Lord as exhibited in the land of Mathura and Vrindavana, which are sweeter than anything in the world? Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura replies that the pastimes of the Lord in Vrindavana are meant to be relished by advanced devotees of the Lord. Neophyte devotees will misunderstand such supreme transcendental activities of the Lord, and therefore the Lord's pastimes in the material sphere related to creation, maintenance, and destruction are very relishable by the Prakrita, or are verily relishable by the Prakrita or mundane devotees of the Lord. As the yoga system, mainly based on bodily exercises, is meant for the person who is too much attached to the bodily conception of existence, similarly, the Lord's pastime related to the creation and destruction of the material world are for those who are too materially attached. For such mundane creatures, the functions of the body and the functions of the cosmic world through physical laws in relationship with the Lord are also therefore included in understanding of the lawmaker, the supreme personality of Godhead. The scientists explain the material functions by so many technological terms of material law, but such blind scientists forget the lawmaker. The Srimad Bhagavatam points out the lawmaker. One should not be amazed by the mechanical arrangement of the complicated engine or dynamo, but one should praise the engineer who creates such a wonderful working machine. That is the difference between the devotee and the non-devotee. Devotees are always full with praising the Lord who directs the physical laws. In the Bhagavad Gita 9.10, the direction of the Lord upon the material nature is described as follows. Mayadhyakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam hetunanena kaunteya jagad viparivartate. The material nature, full of physical laws, is one of my different energies. Therefore, it is neither independent nor blind, because I am transcendently all powerful. Simply by my glancing over the material nature, the physical laws of nature work so wonderfully. The actions and reactions of the physical laws work on the account, and thus material world is created, maintained, and annihilated again and again. Men with poor fund of knowledge, however, become astonished by studying the physical laws both within the construction of the individual body and within the cosmic manifestation, and foolishly they decry the existence of God, taking it for granted that the physical laws are independent without any metaphysical control. The Bhagavad Gita 9.11 replies to this foolishness in the following word. Avajananti mamudha manushim tanumashritam param bhavamajananto mama bhuta maheshwaram. The foolish men, Mudha, do not know the personality of Godhead.
Mama bhuta maheshwaram. Bhutani. Mama bhuta.
Mama bhuta maheshwaram. The foolish men, Mudha, do not know the personality of Godhead in his eternal form of bliss and knowledge. The foolish man thinks of the transcendental body of the Lord as something like his own, and therefore he cannot think of the unlimited controlling power of the Lord, who is not visible in acting of the physical laws. The Lord is, however, visible to the naked eyes of people in general when he descends himself by his own personal potency. Lord Krishna incarnated himself as he is and played very wonderful parts as the Lord himself. And the Bhagavad Gita concerns such wonderful actions and knowledge. Yet, foolish men will not accept Lord Krishna as the Supreme Lord. Generally, they consider the infinitesimal and infinite features of the Lord because they themselves are unable to become either the infinitesimal or infinite, but one should know that the infinite and the infinitesimal sizes of the Lord are not his highest glories. The most wonderful manifestation of the Lord's power is exhibited when the infinite Lord becomes visible to our eyes as one of us. Yet, his activities are different from those of the finite beings. Lifting a mountain at the age of 7 years and marrying 16,000 wives in the prime of his youth, are some of the examples of his infinite energy. But the Mudas, after seeing them or hearing about them, decry them as legendary and take the Lord as one of them. They cannot understand that Lord Sri Krishna, although in the form of a human being, by his own potency, is still the Supreme Lord with full potency as the Supreme Controller. When, however, the Mudas give submissive and oral reception to the messages of the Lord in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita or in the Srimad Bhagavatam through the channel of disciplic succession, such Mudas also become devotees of the Lord by the grace of his pure devotees. And for this reason only, either in the Bhagavad Gita or in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the pastimes of the Lord in the material world are delineated for the benefit of those men with poor fund of knowledge. Hare Krishna.
So the glories of Lord has been spoken, that how the foolish people cannot understand the glories. The foolish people think that Lord's body is something like their own. That has been spoken. So this verse speaks about how the creation has been done. Okay, so stop here. Thursday will meet. Vaishakapadaridesha, Pasandevacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Krishnanebhyo Namo Namo, Nishkundaki Jai, Shkatur Parthi Jai.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.